All eyes are on Vermont as the state embarks on a first-in-the-nation program to rid our kids' classrooms of a toxic chemical. In 2021, the legislature tasked the Environmental Conservation Department with developing a program to pinpoint PCB contamination in our schools by testing indoor air. Any school constructed or renovated before 1980 is legally obligated to participate. The man-made chemicals were primarily produced by the chemical giant Monsanto between 1930 and 1979, before the EPA banned them. For half a century, PCBs were commonly used in building materials and electrical equipment in institutional settings throughout Vermont. The carcinogen is hazardous at very low levels, harming immune, reproductive, nervous, and endocrine systems. You may recall Burlington High School was condemned nearly 3 years ago because of high PCB levels. The discovery prompted the question, how many other Vermont students and staff are being exposed? This morning, our Christina Gesford gets an exclusive look at the process for testing those other at-risk schools.
Our brave little state is on the bleeding edge of what the world's leading PCB experts tell me will inevitably become a national health problem, leaving our state officials and residents to navigate uncharted territory as we likely build a blueprint for the rest of the country. Proctor High School is one of about 325 schools required by state law to participate in Vermont's unprecedented PCB program. I tag along with an environmental consultant as they test the classrooms for this dangerous forever chemical.
Perfect.
It's called a low-flow air sampling pump, and it is strapped onto a tripod to get it up to, an average sort of child's breathing level between 3 and 4 feet off the ground.
Harper Environmental Associates is one of 6 consulting firms the state hired to conduct the indoor air testing. The way this device works, Director Craig Sterrett says, it pulls air into the clear tubing and a cartridge captures PCB emissions.
So it's this piece of foam right here that's collecting the PCBs?
This white thing right here, yeah.
And these are set up throughout the building?
They are, yes. Right now we're on the basement level of this school where there are classrooms and gym facilities and the cafeteria. It's a 24-hour sampling period, and the reason it's that long is the levels of the PCBs that we're looking at are very, very, very low.
Levels measured in microscopic amounts, nanograms per cubic meter. But even the tiniest concentrations are a huge hazard. Sterrett explains consultants sample more than a third of the rooms in any given school, up to half in smaller buildings like Proctor's.
The first step of all of this is we come and do what's called a building inventory, and we go into every room and area in the school, every single interior space, and we identify every single material that could possibly contain PCBs.
Paints, caulks, glues, plastics, fluorescent light ballasts, transformers, ceiling tiles, window glazing, spray-on fireproofing, all common culprits.
827.
Over time, those materials break down, releasing the cancer-causing chemical into the air. Toxic air students, staff, and faculty may breathe for years.
How would you explain to parents why every classroom in every school doesn't need to be tested?
Schools are pretty cookie cutter, and the 4th grade classroom's usually right next to the 5th grade classroom and made with the exact same materials.
The samples collected in schools are shipped to labs like Pace Analytical for processing. Once state officials receive the results, they alert the districts. In the worst cases, like Burlington High School, rooms or entire buildings could be condemned.
The indoor air sampling that we do serves 2 purposes. One is to see if there is an immediate danger to the health of building occupants, and the second is if there are PCBs in a room, they're coming from a source.
The state is covering the cost for environmental consultants like Harper to test the indoor air in the estimated 325 schools. But that's it. Every effort after that is on the district's dime. The cost to investigate PCB sources and clean up contamination comes out of the taxpayer's pocket, and schools that exceed action levels can't opt out.
The Vermont legislature has earmarked 3 pots of funding, $4.5 million for the initial testing, $32 million for assessment, mitigation, and remediation, and $2.5 million for urgent source sampling and cleanup. Mitigation reduces concentrations in the air by improving ventilation, replacing HVAC filters, or wiping down surfaces. Remediation removes the PCB containing material completely. Whether that's enough money to do the work will depend on the number of schools with contamination and the severity of the problem in each. State officials propose the districts foot the bills up front.
Yeah, next up.
Then the state reimburse up to 80% of the costs.
Where's your next?
But the legislature hasn't given that plan the green light yet.
If it wasn't for the legislature making this a priority, we would not be looking at it.
Since 2021, DEC's Patricia Coppolino has led the team laying the program's foundation. Historically, she says, PCB contamination is regulated federally. But Vermont took the issue into its own hands, designing a unique and efficient approach. Rather than sampling building materials at random, hunting for the cause to minimize the effect, the state's method is to detect the effect first, then eliminate the cause.
In the spaces where PCBs exist, then you focus your time and effort that way.
Coppolino says other states are already asking Vermont officials for guidance as leaders explore similar mandates and consider establishing programs of their own.
Let's go to the cafeteria.
Collaboration and communication is key, she says, while the country faces a steep learning curve.
Building a program from the ground up and having to implement it pretty quickly afterwards has been difficult, but with some really great partners, it's been something that we can really hang our hats on and say we're doing the best that we can.
The testing schedule prioritizes the oldest schools and those serving the youngest students in the most disadvantaged communities. Since testing started in September 2022, DEC has published 19 schools' results publicly. Of those, 7 contain contaminated spaces, 2 of which demand immediate action. And those totals are moving targets, constantly rising as results roll in from the labs weekly.
What is it like for you and your company to work on this first in the nation, unprecedented PCB program?
This is the largest scale investigation that I've worked on because there are so many pieces to it. And being able to be part of a team that is learning how to solve this problem, just a rewarding process.
DEC is requesting a 1-year extension to complete the sampling phase of the project, pushing the deadline from July 2025 to July 2026. Department officials also say the $4.5 million dedicated to the program probably isn't sufficient, so they're planning on asking the legislature for more financing in 2024. In Proctor, Christina Gesford, Channel 3 News.